Dave Simon is Dave Simon MMA on Twitter.com, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, some MMA. What's happening, Dave?
Bad news in MMA right now. Alexander Gustafsson, who was supposed to fight Gegard Mousasi in the main event of the UFC on Fuel.
Yep.
In Sweden in 6 days' time. Word coming out just about an hour ago that he suffered a cut in training, and it's looking like he's going to be out of that fight. Fight could be canceled.
What do they do there? You're talking about a main event 6 days away. They just cancel the whole thing, or how does it work?
No, they probably won't cancel the whole event. I think they're going to look for a replacement opponent for Gegard Mousasi.
In 6 days, though?
Yeah, well, it's tough. What they're going to look at is the rest of the card and see who can step up. Problem is, Gegard versus Gustafsson was a light heavyweight fight, so usually you'd look at another light heavyweight on the card and say, well, do you want to step up and fight in the main event? There are no other light heavyweights on this card. There are a couple middleweight fights, and Tom Lawler, who is supposed to fight on this card against Michael Kuiper, has said on Twitter that he's ready to step up and fight Gegard at 205. I don't know if the UFC is going to be really interested in that idea. I mean, Tom Lawler is not a top 10 middleweight, and Alexander Gustafsson is a top 10 light heavyweight. So Lawler coming in to fight Gegard doesn't make a lot of sense right now. So the UFC trying to figure out what's going on. No official announcement, though, yet from the UFC. It's just kind of the word out of the UFC Sweden Twitter account and different people. That's the message right now, that Gustafsson suffered a cut and is out of the fight.
Okay, let's just play what if. What if they actually ended up doing that because they did want to salvage a main event and they didn't have a lot of options and they put Lawler in the main event? What happens then to the opponent he was going to fight? Do they try and get a local guy from Sweden to try and just step in?
Yeah, I mean, they'll find somebody maybe to step in on short notice, another middleweight to step in and fight this guy. It's going to be easier to find somebody to step in on 6 days' notice to fight Michael Kuiper than it is to fight Gegard Mousasi. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's a top 10 light heavyweight in the world. It's going to be hard to find a replacement opponent for him, and I think that's the concern right now of the UFC, is to keep at least one half of their main event on this card. You got to figure, the selling power without Gegard Mousasi in the main event, it's just not as strong.
Now, what's in it for Lawler? Just a bigger payday, bigger profile for him? Is that it?
Yeah, it's a bigger fight, bigger profile, more money. The UFC's happy with you because
you're helping them out.
You're helping them out. You're stepping up, and if he beats Gegard, it puts him in a real interesting position. It's a big opportunity.
Is he a big body guy that you could see him stepping up to that weight class easily?
I think he'd get destroyed. I mean, he's not a huge middleweight, but Gegard is not a big light heavyweight. Gegard is a former middleweight that a lot of people believe should still be fighting at 185 pounds. He's just a guy that doesn't like to cut any kind of weight, so he walks around at 205, and he fights at 205. So I don't think size would really be a difference. It's just skill. I mean, Gegard is at another level than a guy like Tom Lawler.
So anything out of Mousasi camp here?
No, nothing yet. I mean, I told you the thing just broke about an hour ago, so really nothing yet out of Gegard Mousasi. Gegard actually just tweeted recently that he doesn't know anything. He's heard about the injury. He said, I just heard the news about Alex's injury. Right now, I don't have any new info about the situation, and that was 2 hours ago.
What do you know about this guy, Gustafsson?
He's a big, tall, Swedish fighter, very tough guy, very good striker. He's looking like one of the best light heavyweights in the UFC and is making a play for a title shot. This fight with Gegard was very, very important. It's a guy that John Jones has said he would like to fight at some point down the line. He's coming off a win over Mauricio Shogun Rua, a former champion. So Gustafsson is a very tough guy. He was a 2-1 favorite going into this fight with Gegard.
Did you have him winning as well?
No. I think Gegard would win the fight between the two. But, it's an interesting matchup. Gegard making his UFC debut. He's been doing very, very well outside the UFC for many years. A former Dream champion and Strikeforce champion coming into the UFC. Is going to be a very tough fight for Gegard, but I think technique-wise, Gegard was just a better striker. I think he just has more skill than Gustafsson, but the size was definitely going to be a factor and going to be a real tough challenge for Mousasi to deal with. I think he was going to deal with it, but now, unfortunately, we might never find out, which is real disappointing because as far as big-time fights that I was excited about, this is a big fight for hardcore MMA fans. They really want to see Gustafsson, Mousasi. It's a great fight. It's an important fight in the light heavyweight division. It's the main event of a card in 6 days, and now, unfortunately, because of cut on Gustafsson in training, it seems like this fight is now off.
All right. Well, elsewhere, Dave, what else is happening in the next big UFC pay-per-view card or elsewhere?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some events going down this week. Bellator 95 will go down this week. Pat Curran, the Bellator featherweight champion, defending his title against Shabulat Shamalayev. Also, an all-women's card goes down on Friday night. Invicta FC doing their 5th event. Had Sarah Kaufman on the card, former Strikeforce champion. She's a Canadian from out in Victoria, BC. She was on my show on Friday night talking about that fight she has with Leslie Smith and Christiane Cyborg Santos, former Strikeforce champion, coming off a long suspension due to steroids, will now be making her return to the MMA scene, fighting on Friday night at Invicta FC.
Now, for those of the audience out there that doesn't know what Invicta is, please explain. And the second part of the question there is, the winner of that fight, would they then start to be looked upon by UFC as potentially being picked up there? The
winner of which fight?
You're talking about Kaufman and...
Yeah, Kaufman fighting with Leslie Smith. It really is likely that she will win that fight. She is looked at as the favorite, and she'll probably be heading into the UFC. Cyborg, unfortunately, fights at 145 pounds.
And they don't have that category.
Yeah, so the UFC only carries 135 pounds when it comes to the women's division right now. Ronda Rousey, of course, the champion. And, if you don't know about Invicta FC... it's an all-women's MMA promotion. They're going to be having atomweight and strawweight title fights on that card as well. Atomweight's, I think, or is it atomweight? Yeah, I think it's like 105 pounds and 115 pounds. All women's fights. It's a good promotion from out in Kansas City, and you can buy their show on their website, invictafc.com. It's only $10. And really...
wow, that's a pretty good deal for fight fans.
It's a very good deal on a Friday night.
It's not on, for example, Bell or anything like that. You just go to their website, you watch it there.
Yeah, it's like an internet pay-per-view.
Invictafc.com.
Yeah, and you can watch Cyborg Santos fight. You can watch Sarah Kaufman fight. Former Strikeforce champions. And, I expect a win for Sarah Kaufman will put her into the UFC. And she'll be on a hunt for another title shot. Her last fight was against Ronda Rousey in August, and she's itching to get back in there.
Is this a promotion that can stand on its own 2 legs, or is this a promotion that is just going to get swallowed up and give the UFC some women's categories?
I think this is a promotion that can definitely stand up on its own for as long as the UFC wants them to. Really, I mean, I think the UFC at some point could buy them. But if they buy them, that means you have to bring in all these different women's divisions. I think that what makes Invicta so special is they are really the only promotion with legitimate divisions in these different weight classes that the UFC doesn't cover. I mean, the UFC's only covering 135 pounds. So you have fighters fighting at 145, 155, 125, 115, and even 105 that have a home now in Invicta, have championship bouts. So in MMA, what you really want is the best in the world at whatever weight class or whatever you have. You want to have the best in the world, and that's what Invicta has. They have a niche market in mixed martial arts, which are weight classes for women's MMA that aren't covered in the UFC, and that's why they're successful, and that's why they're necessary right now in MMA, because so many women are inspired by people like Cyborg and Sarah Kaufman and Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate, that they're getting into this sport. The influx of talent in MMA on the women's side and the men's side, it just keeps growing and growing. So Invicta, it's a necessary promotion right now, and that's why they're doing so well.